I'm Adrienne Enns, and I welcome you to the Intention Sessions podcast. I want to inspire our most intentional living. In each episode, we'll talk to remarkable individuals who will share their authentic journeys and their insights with us. They're going to remind us that life's complexities can be our greatest teachers, and that intentional living can be expressed in an infinite number of ways. I hope you find some inspiration for your most intentional life right here. Today on the podcast, we have Debra Christmas. Debra is a seasoned leader in the high-tech field. In her 40-plus-year career, she has led IT organizations in driving change and transformation through engaged, diverse, and high-performance teams around the world. She is a senior executive partner at Gartner and recently co-authored the book, Please Stay: How Women in Tech Survive and Thrive. She is a dynamic leader and widely recognized for her many contributions to leadership, mentorship, diversity coaching, and the list goes on. I met Debra a few years ago through a mentorship group for entrepreneurs, and it may not surprise you that our common denominator is choosing to live in the world from a place of joy. So, Debra, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks for having me, Adrienne. I remember that day well.
And I feel like we have so much ground to cover, from the work you're doing to leadership to personal philosophies. But where I'd really love to start is with your new book. Do you want to tell us, what was the inspiration behind it and what did you want to accomplish with it?
Well, thank you so much. It's been quite the journey with the book, and it was one of these, like life. I don't believe in accidents at all or coincidences. I believe that people's paths cross for a reason. And Kelly Irwin and I, my co-author, met. She was a Gartner client. And people had said to me when I first joined Gartner that, you need to meet Kelly. You need, just from the way that we talk and think about things, I guess. And we're very, very different people, different countries, different races, different upbringings, like so different. And I didn't really actually know the day that I met her that I was actually meeting her. We were sitting across the table from a boardroom table, a big Gartner event, and she had on a watch and I like watches, and I like not crazy expensive watches, but I like big face watches. And she had this watch on, and I just pointed, silent. We haven't even communicated. Silently across, a big 6-foot boardroom table, and pointed to her watch, sort of with a thumbs up, and was whispering, "Is it a Nixon?" And which is a watch that, not an expensive watch, but my daughter has one, and she gave me one, and I thought it looked very similar. And she's mouthing back, "No, it's a Movado." And then this is how we met. And
I
then
love it.
Didn't know that was Kelly Irwin, because she was in and out of the event that day. She was at the time one of the CIOs for TD Bank, and they were having some kind of issue, and she was in and out. She was up. So we did not talk, believe it or not. Fast forward, 6-7 months later, and we're at Gartner's big symposium event, which is our big annual conference where, tens of thousands of people show up in Florida at Disney World. And we host a Canadian dinner for the, 80, 90 Canadian clients that might be at this event with 20,000 other people. So we close off a restaurant and we host a dinner, and it's packed, as you can well imagine. And we're out in this little courtyard. It's outside. It's October. It's Florida. It's beautiful. And somebody comes over and says, "I need to introduce you to Kelly." And it's her.
I love it.
And the funny part about that, she sits down and the other person goes, off on their merry way. I kid you not. We look up about 11 or quarter to 12, because our event sort of went from 7 till 10, 7 till something like that, and reception and all that. And we look up, there's nobody around except for the restaurant and the wait people.
You shut the place down.
We did. And we looked up and we were like, where'd everybody go? And we looked and we said, "Are we keeping you from going home? All of you people here?" Like we closed the restaurant down. And we were like, oh my God, we're so sorry. And we left. We jumped in an Uber together because we were sort of staying at the hotel. So we obviously had been there for like 3 hours yakking about and in that conversation, we got talking about women in technology. I'm a few years older than Kelly, maybe 5 years older than she is. And the challenges that we've had being in a male dominated field, blah, 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 blah. And somehow the book comes up in discussion. And I said to her, oh, I was writing a book, a different book, believe it or not. When I joined Gartner, I was writing a book entitled No Longer Required: The Joys and Challenges of Corporate Restructuring. And I had got permission from Gartner when I came on board, because you're not allowed to write a book at Gartner unless it's Gartner published and written. And if you're an analyst, I'm not an analyst, but I was writing that book, and you had to, in order to work for Gartner, you had to give up the book. And I'm like, no, I'm not giving up the book. Let's negotiate something. And what we negotiated was that they would have to review the content, which was fair, because anything, if I'm working for you and I'm writing something, it better not be litigious in some way, shape, or form.
Of course.
This is Gartner's brand. So that was fair. And I said, okay, fine. And so Kelly says in this discussion, she wanted to write a book. And doesn't she say, maybe we should write that book together? And that's where it started.
It's amazing. I do want to just circle you back to your blah, 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 just because I'm curious, like it may be so obvious to you, but for somebody listening who, we just never want to make assumptions, like what are the challenges for women in that field and in that environment?
Oh gosh, there's so many. But you know what? I'll be honest. They are the challenges that many women have in business, period. But in technology, it is so male dominated. We are like 23% of this industry. And the computer geek, computer nerdy kind of guy in the, computer console under the desk doing, cabling stuff. Like this is the image of computer people. And that is not most females, working through the night with pizza and beer. And that's not most females. So the culture is sort of this bro kind of culture, can you go home and shower maybe or something? I know the code needs to get done, but it can wait another day. Like it's just a very different environment. So when you think about from an education point of view, the numbers of women in engineering, the number of women in science and math and technology, those classes in those universities and colleges, women are a minority. And even today, they're still a minority. And even if they were equal, Adrienne, at the start, they're not equal at the end. Many of the women or young, teenage, I went to university at 17 years old. So young teenage girls going in do not want to be sitting in a room with 50 guys. You're the only girl. So it's just in the behaviors and the way that you're treated and the usual kinds of things being talked over. Your ideas end up in somebody else's mouth when you just said it and they just repeat it. And everybody's like, oh, that's a great idea. Like it's the usual things of, the way that you're treated, some of the comments. Oh, honey, can you get me a coffee? Yeah, okay. It's all of that. So this is what I'm saying. It's not necessarily unique as much because lots of other industries, manufacturing, one of my dear friends is in the automotive business. You can imagine that business. I know somebody else in the steel business. I know people in the mining, women in the mining business. So male-dominated careers. But part of the other challenge for women in IT is a lot of gals grow up and think they're not good in math and they're not good in science. And they listen to some of these things that someone has whispered into their ears. And they can very easily succumb to being dominated by a strong male in a room. Sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot, Adrienne, like we walk into the room and we sit on the sidelines. Like, why wouldn't you go to the big table and sit down? Or we walk up to the table and say, is there somebody sitting there? There's nobody in the seat. But that's,
yeah.
But women will say, is there somebody sitting there? A guy is just going to sit down. Okay, he's not asking anybody's permission. He's just going to sit down. So there are some elements that, that are, I call them, really there are differences in the gender. We are raised and socialized to be caregivers and to put other people's needs before us. So some of these behaviors that manifest themselves in the workforce, some of those behaviors are going on in people's house.
Absolutely.
So, but in the field, the challenge that we have is we are good at math and we are good at science and we are phenomenal engineers. So we cannot have women leaving the field because of the culture of the field. If you want to leave for another reason because you want to do something else and travel the world and, climb Mount Everest, go right ahead. But please do not leave the field after you've gone to college or university and have your degrees and did all that it took to do that. And you're going to leave? No, 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 no.
So, what do you say to them? And I'm sure this is the contents of your book, and I imagine many times you've wanted to leave. So, what is that point or many points, but like what changes your mind and keeps women there?
Well, I think I was very fortunate in the sense that I never wanted to leave.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
Not ever. Okay. Not ever. And I think.
So this is sorry to interrupt you, but
No,
the
no, go
behavior
ahead.
you just described, that never got to you so much where you were fed
Never.
up. Okay.
Never. But I now know why. Okay. And I didn't know
Yeah.
throughout my career. Someone asked me many years ago, how come you're so confident and calm and you seem to have a pretty good sense of yourself? Not arrogant confidence, but you're strong and you're assertive.
Yeah.
My answer was because I was raised as a boy. And they said, "What?" I said, "We were raised with no gender distinction. I'm the oldest. And I now know how unusual it was that my parents said, don't let anybody ever tell you you can't do anything. Don't back down from any challenge. Take your rightful place wherever you are. Know right from wrong. Stand your ground. Don't be intimidated." I was raised that way.
It's amazing.
Well, it's amazing because I was born in 1957,
Yeah.
and
Well,
that's
it's just
unusual.
amazing in general, to just, have these consistent messages instilled in you.
Exactly. So I knew nothing different. So if someone sort of, talked over me or interrupted, I'd be like, "Excuse me, are your ears not working?"
I love it.
And I have a pretty decent sense of humor, so I called it all out, Adrian. I never hesitated.
Good.
I'd be like, "Jim, thanks for using your voice to put my idea on the table. I so appreciate that." And then I just let the air stand there. So I would never, you cannot put up with bad behavior. You cannot let something go because that is actually one of the things that for women, and I think it's more than women in tech, because I've now talked to so many women where we just don't use our voice properly. We don't want to be confrontational. We don't want to make a fuss. We want to be nice. Well, you can still be nice and still tell someone they're being a jerk.
Absolutely.
And and jerk has no gender, by the way, because we've got both female jerks and male jerks. So you have to be able to, stand up for yourself. And as Kelly and I talked, it was two people coming together where we have the same perspective in some things and we have different perspectives. I said, we're like the Siskel and Ebert of high tech. For those people who know
It's a
who
good
that is.
combo, just to have not the same experience, right?
Right. That's exactly it, because she is a STEM graduate, science, technology, engineering, math. She is what someone would call a computer geek. She wanted to be a coder and software and all of that. I want to be a criminal attorney. We are very far apart from each other. And yet we both have survived in this field, for 30, 40 plus years because we could navigate it. And we were not going to let anybody tell us that we didn't deserve to be here and we weren't leaving. So we have lots of lessons. And that's what really we said, you know what? We've got some stories to tell, but we didn't want it just to be our stories. We wanted to, so we feature 21 women in this book. And we wanted to hear other women talk about the issues, which, we identified sort of 10 categories in the book, like having the courage to stick to your convictions. How do you deal with the barriers that you face? How do you deal with real discrimination? How do you deal with women who are foes and not friends? Because there are some of those.
Absolutely.
We wanted it to be real life advice, first of all, and tips and how-tos with real voices. Meaning it's not, I retired 20 years ago and this is what I did back in the 1930s. These are women that are in the field every day, still today, working hard. And that's what we wanted to do so that it was current.
Amazing. So, what are some of I know there's the whole book and like all of these stories, but like if you had to give us, a few pieces of advice or wisdom, but what are some of the core takeaways of how women survive and thrive in that environment?
Well, one of the most important is to find your voice. The 10 chapters that we wrote were on barriers. We talked about the path, because there's different paths to get to a technology career. We talked about courage. We talked about friend or foe, meaning, females. We talked about men as allies. We talked about real gender challenges, like we always go make the coffee, as an example. You're not at home. You're not there to serve somebody, but we go do it. We talk about real joy in, taking real joy in your career choice. Real discrimination we do talk about, leaving if you think of leaving, and we talk about using your voice. So one of the key things is in order to use your voice, you need to find your voice. And you need to really understand that you have a right to be in that room. Take your place at the table and take it with pride and take it with conviction and figure out how do you strengthen and bring your voice forward so that you are heard, because you deserve to be heard. And quite frankly, the way technology is pervasive in every part of our life, we have an opinion, and we have an opinion that matters. We are half of the workforce across the planet. We can't have one side of the workforce talking and the other side not talking. So that's a really important part, because we find that women in the workforce often struggle. And part of that could be socialization. It could be how you were raised. You might have been raised in a very traditional home. You might not have been encouraged to go to school and educate yourself. I know there are some women I grew up with. So as I said, I'll be 64 years old this year. I know some women in high school who were getting married like 6 months after they graduated from high school. And in Montreal, you graduated at 16. Think about that for a minute.
Yeah.
Going to get married, and they wanted to have children. More power to you. I'm not saying anything if that's what you want to do. Absolutely. But there were women who wanted to go on and be a rocket scientist who were told, no, you can't do that because girls don't do that. So a lot of women, come through, and they got a little bit of work to do to have the confidence and build their confidence in order to express their opinions. Of course, it does matter how you express your opinion. We've all had the honey, as I mentioned earlier, honey, could you get me a cup of coffee, please? I've had it with the CEO of a company, big company. And I'm in the room. I'm the expert in the room, by the way, with 6 other men, the CEO and a couple of his people. And he says, honey, could you get me a cup of coffee? Now, what am I going to do? I could have said, are you a raving lunatic? Do you not? But I could have went off. Okay, I really could. I really could have. You know that. And you know me.
Yeah.
I could have had some words, but I looked at him and I said, of course, Schnookums, what would you like in it? Now, you could have heard a pin drop in that room.
Yeah.
All the men, especially the men from my company, senior executives, were thinking, oh my God, she did not just
You don't even
say
know what you just did.
And they're thinking, there goes the sale. There goes the money. There goes. And of course, what was 30 seconds felt like it was 30 minutes, as you can imagine. And the CEO of this company, and his name was Bud, big guy. He was like 6'4". Oh my God, he was huge. And he stood up and he said, touche, young woman, let me go and get the coffee. What would you like? And you could hear everybody else exhale in the room.
Yeah.
Truly. Now, if he had got himself up in arms and said something to me, I don't know what my retort would have been, but I can guarantee you there would have been a retort. But I've always been courageous. So you're not calling me honey at work.
No. And how do you, for the women that you're mentoring, how do you help them find their voice? Like if somebody, and I could just see, someone might be listening to this in your field or just, looking to find their voice in a general sense, right? Like this is a life skill. So where can somebody start?
Well, the first thing I try to, because I do executive coaching. I've been trained, with as a
Hmm.
CGI coach. So what's as we all know when we do coaching, I know you do some as well, is you have to get to the heart of why don't you have a voice? Like what's the issue? What's preventing you? So if it is confidence, well then I got to work on the confidence. If it's afraid of being wrong, well get over that because we're all going to be wrong. So you sort of have to get to the heart of it. But when with some of the tips that we gave in the book was don't be invisible because you're not invisible. And you say that to a woman, don't be invisible. You are meant to be here. I can see them take that in
Yeah.
because they can feel that emotion. Like, why are you hiding yourself? And then I talked often, I find out, get a little bit about their history. I try to help them get comfortable with speaking their opinion. If they have children, particularly daughters, I say to them, what advice would you give to your child? I've got a 32-year-old daughter, and she is a force of nature to be reckoned with, let me tell you. She's got 3 brothers, and she's my only daughter. and, and my granddaughters, I have 7 grandchildren. 3 of them are girls. They're forces of nature to be reckoned with too. Okay, and because you're teaching them at very early ages to find their space and to be comfortable in that. So you do have to figure out for that particular person, because it's never a one size fits all. You have to sort of figure out what's at the heart here, because it could simply be, Adrian, that their father or their parents or they were raised in a home where children were seen and not heard. It could be that.
Hmm.
And then, so that's a little bit of reprogramming, because then you sort of have to get to the heart of how would you like to behave? How would you like to be perceived? So you got to try and get to what's really going on. And then we, have some tips for them, because there are some women with very strong opinions, but they might be an introvert.
Yes.
So they let everybody else speak first. And you might have to train them a little bit, or they'll be prepared to leave the room because, 3 people said something and they don't need to say anything. And that's not true. So it just really depends. The actionable part, we do provide some guidance. Each chapter's got like 5 tips of how you can do this. And then if we really have something particular with a person, and I have had with some gals that I've met, where I've had to really sit down and sort of say, okay, we got to work through this, and we're going to do some practicing.
Yeah.
Because even an introvert can find their voice, because the voice has got to be authentic, right? They're not going to say schnookums to the CEO of a company like I did.
It wouldn't have landed the same way,
It
right?
wouldn't have landed the same. Exactly. So you have to sort of, and that's one of the other reasons why doing this is, we're creating a movement here so that other voices can be heard, and so that other pieces of advice can come forward, because somebody might bring forward advice that so resonates with you that you can say, oh, I can do that. That I can do. I don't have the sense of humor that Debra has, or I don't have this background that Kelly's got, but I've got that, and I can do that. And that's what we're hoping to do, is to encourage them to be strong and to be confident and to open their mouth.
And so, how have women been, and men, I guess, too, how have people been responding to the book?
Oh my goodness, Adrian. When we went out last year, probably 6 months before publishing, just to get people's, we got some input on the book title, because initially the working title was Please Don't Go. And Kelly said, oh, let's turn it around and say, please stay. No, it sounds more positive. And I said, okay, good. That's good. I like it. And that was the working title. It was just whether the secondary title, we were comfortable with please stay. So we went out there and posted it on LinkedIn, and holy moly, what came back from hundreds of women around the world, that's when we knew as to, oh, okay, we hit a nerve here. And we've got a movement here, and we're creating a platform for conversation. And not that there aren't many platforms, because there are. There's women in technology, there's women executive networks, there's women of influence, there's Catalyst. Like, there's lots of different organizations, and the more the merrier, quite frankly.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We need to be talking about this. But the reaction that we got around women in tech, we had people from Finland and Stanford saying, can you talk about women in education? Can you talk about women scientists? We're like, we're just going to talk about what we know right now.
Our hands are sort of full, but
But we'll come back to you. We'll come back at some point. So the response was amazing, amazing. And the conversation continues. And that's the most important part.
And how would you like to see things change?
Oh my goodness. You know what? Here's the answer to that question. When I don't have to talk about this anymore, we've got it. We've got it. My goal is I do not have to be talking about gender challenges in the workforce ever again because we're equal. We're seen as an equal. Our voices matter. It's like, how much work I do around diversity. I'm a person of color. The minute I don't have to talk about anti-racist behavior, then we have arrived and we're here. So that's, to me, is what would be the ultimate achievement, is that we've moved this dial, that nobody's looking at a female in high tech like, what are you doing here?
And how did I imagine you talked to lots of your male colleagues too. So how did they respond to the book?
Well, they have been very, very wonderful. We've got, especially at Gartner, where I currently here at Gartner, and all like my colleagues and my team and my boss and my boss's boss, everybody's, how can I help? Really, and it's a little bit more than just, I have daughters, I want to help them. It's more than that. That's a good thing. There's nothing wrong with that. Please do that. If you've got daughters, help them, move forward. But they can see that the field is dominated by males. We are 24% of the global IT market, and they're trying to do their part. And what's important about that is two things. One, know what your part should be. It's not telling me what to do. So that's not it. It's not assuming that you know what I should do. It's really asking, how can I help you? What do you need that I can help support? Because that's really the definition of allyship, right? It's not just men as allies, by the way. Like, we need to really talk about building better allies. Women need to build better allies, both females and males and anything in between. We need people that can understand that this is a marginalized group, whether it's on race or gender or sexual identification or neurodiversity, but there are challenges there. And how do you step forward and help and respond? That's really take action, call out bad behavior. If more men, honestly, if you think about the bad behavior, think about the Me Too movement that we all sort of,
Yeah.
our eyes sort of fell out of our head. Now you think about if the men, the witnesses, I'm going to call them, if all of those men who knew and who witnessed that behavior had said, oh, hell no, nope. Think about what would have happened.
You're
We would have
absolutely
probably had
right.
hundreds and thousands of women who would not have been subjected to the crazy ass behavior that some of these men, put on them. If the men had stood up and said, because the women stood up and took a stand, but you know how many men witnessed that? Appalling to me. And you know how many men were running scared after that? A whole lot.
A whole lot.
So that's important, is that you be courageous as males. If we want to just talk about men as allies, be courageous and call it out. Don't wait for me to have to say anything, because if I say something, then they're starting to call me the B word and all that kind of stuff. They're not calling you that. So speak up and then ask me, how can you help? Oh, and by the way, take some initiative and go help.
Well, that's what I was when I hear you saying this, because I feel like it's relevant again everywhere. But yeah, like having the willingness and like the knowledge and foresight to ask this question of how can I support, and then being really open to listening to the answer, because chances are you don't know the answer, and so to really listen and take it in and respond is a huge part of the equation, right?
Yeah. And ask questions. If
Mhm.
you're a male colleague, how about you open up the conversation and say, you know what? I know this is a real issue. How have you experienced this issue? And how can I help you? Because I want to help. What can I do that would be the most impactful? How about that?
It would be incredible.
Would be incredible. Because when we call out bad behavior, then it's like, all the stuff we went through last year with the murders and the killings of Black people in North America and around the world raised their head up and said, oh my God. Now, that doesn't mean that every person that's not a Black person is a racist person, but they've been oblivious to what has taken place. And it's not like we're trying to, say, hold them accountable per se for somebody else's behavior. But how about you ask, what's your experience been as a person of color? Where have you been discriminated against? What challenges have you had? How have you felt? Where are you now? What can I do? Even if it's just to listen to you and have a conversation.
Absolutely. It's so powerful. And we all, it sounds so cliche to say it, but we have so much to learn from each other. We do
Yes.
make these assumptions, and it's like if we could just pause and listen to your earlier point, it's so powerful.
And here's an analogy. A dear friend of mine, best friend, lives in Wales. And she's lived in Canada here for 40 years. She's from the UK originally and went and retired in Wales. And she's learning Welsh, and which is a very difficult language to learn.
Mhm.
It takes
Full
a
of
lot of
consonants.
studying. Yeah, so it's really, I love the sound of it. Anyway, she's in class and somebody says, I'm just so tired about hearing about all this, thing about Black people and the Black Lives Matter and the this and the that. And she just said, so how do you think about the people who lived it?
Yeah.
Now, luckily, this man said, oh my goodness, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't think about it from that perspective. He was just kind of tired of hearing it all in the news,
Yeah.
but she goes, yeah, we've been living it for 50 years. That's all it takes is to just raise somebody's awareness. If you're exhausted, how do you think I feel?
Exactly. And for him to be open to it, right? As opposed to getting defensive, to be like, oh, yeah, like,
Yeah,
I could really change how I'm looking at this.
exactly. So that's what we have to do for gender as well. And any other issue that you have to discuss, or, these are hard conversations. Okay, let's all acknowledge that these are hard conversations. Let's do it. But that doesn't mean that we can't have them.
Absolutely.
It's challenging.
Deborah, I wanted to ask you another question. I want to pull back the lens a little bit. You and I talk a lot about intention and we
Yes.
talk a lot about joy. And those are my next two questions for you. In terms of leadership and navigating your career, how would you describe intentional leadership?
Well, I'm going to talk about it maybe with intentional living. Okay.
Be my guest. I love that.
Because you and I talk about this a lot. But for me, being intentional means living on and with purpose. Okay. I'm living on
Mhm.
purpose and I'm living with purpose. And what that means for me personally is that I truly give thought to everything that I do and I say. And I contemplate the impact of how I walk in the world. I think about this. This is stuff I think about as to how are you behaving? How are you responding? How are you treating somebody? What are you saying? Do you have a tone in how you're saying something? I really do think about this because I think that leadership and just being a decent human being starts with awareness. It starts with self-awareness, most important of all. And we think we're very self-aware. For most of us, we're not, unless you really do this consciously, where you sort of look at how do you behave and how do people respond to you and how do you correct things, your missteps, and are you accountable for your behavior and your thoughts? Do you use the I word more than you use the you word? I really do actually think about that.
And what led you to think about that? Have you always just thought that way, or has it evolved over time?
Well, I had phenomenal role models, you see, and that is huge. My mother and my grandmother, two of the most important people in my world, were the nicest, kindest people you ever want to meet. Kind, happy, giving, take the shirt off their back. That's what I grew up with. And because I heard, oh, Mrs. So-and-so needs such and such, or go down the street and help Mr. So-and-so, he's got this that he has to do, go help him. This is how we were raised, in a community of kindness and giving. And of course, you don't know that as a child, that's how it would be described, but that's what's in front of you. So if that's what's in front of you, that's what you learn. And I remember having conversations with my grandparents, because my grandparents took care of me when I was really young, like 3 and 4 years old, and would drop me to nursery school and all that kind of stuff. And I remember hearing certain things of, you always give people the benefit of the doubt. You assume goodness before malice. Like, these are things that my grandparents taught me. My grandmother said, she said it out loud. I said, I should probably write a little book on lessons from my grandmother.
Yeah, you should.
Really, because these were some of those lessons. She said things like, you need to be able to put your head down on the pillow at night and be able to sleep with a clear conscience that you've done good in the world today. You need to be able to get up in the morning and look in the mirror and not look away. That you see clarity in who you are, and that hopefully that's a good person. And one of the biggest, most important rules was, and don't ever, ever, ever get in the gutter with them.
I was so curious what you were going to say.
Yeah, I know. And I'll tell you a funny little story. At 8 years old, I'd come home from school, and some little kid had done something, whatever. And my grandmother said, don't you worry about that, little missy. God will take care of that. How does she say? She said, you get out of this world tenfold. It comes back to you tenfold what you put out. So be careful about what you put out. Because when she told me that, don't you worry, God will take care of little Johnny. And I'm like, oh, goody, goody. And she said, don't you goody, goody me. I said, no.
This isn't vengeance.
Oh my God. He was this little 4'9" dynamo. And she said, that's bad karma. I kid you not.
Yeah.
And 8 years old, I said, Granny, what's karma? I don't know what the heck does karma mean? And she said, life will give back to you what you put out. And Johnny will get his due. Don't you worry. But here's the thing. You don't get to wish it. You don't get to celebrate it, and you don't get to witness it.
That is powerful advice.
Yes, 8. I never forgot what karma meant from that day on. So I think because I had those examples, and when you and I met and I saw your cards and I said, oh my God, remember I told you that day in that little restaurant, I said, I have the email address. I choose joy every day.
I know. Well, this was going to lead me into my next question for you, because there would have been a time in my life, where I was very unintentional, as we all know, but I wouldn't have connected with somebody over the topic of joy. And I also remember that meeting so well, and just with this huge fondness of, if this is what connects us, what else is there?
What else is there? And because both my mother and my grandmother, it's not that they didn't have hardships.
Mm-hmm.
My grandmother came up here, she was born in 1900. They came up here from Barbados. My grandmother, because my mother was born here, they came up from Barbados to, have a better life. And literally every week she sent a package back home to Barbados. She didn't have a whole lot of money, let me tell you, but she could send something back home to people that had less than her. And because you're raised with that joy, literally, I walked in that door and this little petite little woman would point at her little cheek with the biggest smile on her face and say, put it there. And that was a kiss, had to hit that cheek. That's what I saw every day. I saw my grandparents every day of my life. And such joy to embrace. When you learn this as a kid, you're just happy.
Yeah.
because they're happy around you. So good role models, and, taught me to see the upside of everything. Truly, if you said to my grandmother or my mother, how are you today? They would say, well, my feet were above the ground when I woke up, so it's up from here.
I love it. But I have to say, obviously the upbringing is so instrumental, but you obviously also just took it to heart and really took it to practice, you know? So how do you carry joy forward? Like when things are difficult or hard, like what are the things that keep bringing you back to that?
Well, I'll tell you something first. And this was, I smiled today when I took out your beautiful cards because I thought, well, let me pull a card so I see what the card says for me today. And you're not going to believe what card I picked out of my deck. I witnessed the beauty all around me.
I love it.
I smiled from
Yes.
ear to ear, ear to ear. I was like, oh my God, that is so appropriate. You know how? It's because, and it's not that people don't upset you and you don't have bad days. People have said to me so much time, you're so happy all the time. And my answer is because I choose to be.
Yeah.
I choose to be. That's it's really simple. And I said, that's not always easy, but it's a choice because I just don't want, I said, what is the point of going down the rat hole of despair? Why would I do that? It's a fur-lined rat hole, by the way, because it catches you and keeps you in there.
Well,
Um,
exactly.
I said, so I always look at it from a couple of perspectives. What's the worst that can happen? Truly, like what's the worst that can happen here? That's one thing, because just that you might be in the current situation. What is the worst thing that could happen? And then I kind of look at, will this really matter 5 years from now? Will it even matter a year from now? Maybe it
Yeah.
might not even matter a month from now. So you just try to put it into perspective. And then I do think about, okay, you could go off on this thing and really let it seep into your bones. And then where will we be? Nowhere pretty, put it that way. So you really sort of have to put it into perspective. And I mean, really put it into perspective. Terrible things happen. People get sick. I lost my mother in October. Here's let me tell you what I think about my mother. My mother's passing in October. You're going to, some of your audience going to think she's woohoo. I adored my mother.
Hmm.
I adored my mother. She was one of the most beautiful people on the face of the planet. She had Alzheimer's for a number of years, but she was still doing okay. It wasn't too bad. She didn't have, crazy health pain and all that kind of stuff. And she just decided on a Sunday that she wasn't going to eat anymore. And 4 days later, my mother was dead. I think, and I know this sounds really wonky, I have a grandchild that was being born in December. And I think my mother chose to go at that time because she knew that the only thing that could bring me joy after her death was the birth of a grandchild, and that I would find joy in that. So let me go now, and this will help her. I kid you not, I really truly feel this way.
I think it's beautiful. I really do. And I think I don't know from firsthand experience, but I also think from different stories that I've heard, like, we do just know, I mean, if we have the
Yep.
grace to live as long as we're able to, not suddenly passing, but like you just, she knew to stop eating and that was her time.
Yeah, I think she did. I think she, because I still spoke to her on the phone and she was still lucid and can talk to you. And it was such a shocking kind of, turn of events. And then one day, I, that's how I thought about it one day. And there are things where, you're in your house and the light goes on and this, and Wayne's like, what's going on? I said, oh, that's my mother saying hello.
I love it.
And he just turns around and goes, hi, Shirley.
Oh, that's what it is. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, yeah, because we had weird things like after my father died, and I just one day I just said, "Hello, Ronnie," and I had a big smile on my face, and Wayne is like, "What is happening in here?" But I said, "It's my family coming to say hello." And that's, you just, as much as the loss is, and I miss her every day, the joy of little Maeve, my little granddaughter who was born on December 11th, is beyond joy.
It's so beautiful. And just to, also allow for that joy, right? Like to, hold
Yeah.
both the grief of your mom and the joy of this new grandchild. Like it's sort of the consummate paradox, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the only regret is she did not meet her great grandchild. That's the only regret, really,
Yeah.
because all the lessons that she taught me, this lovely little angel will get.
It's amazing. And so how will you impart joy to your grandchildren?
Well, similar to my grandmother, I am so thrilled to see them at any point in time. It's nothing but joy
Yeah.
when they brace the doorway and in they come. And so part of that life lesson of I am so thrilled that you are here, and I'm so joyful that you are mine and part of me. And you're going to know that somebody in this world, above and beyond your parents, adores the living ground you walk on.
Oh, I love it.
So that's what you show up with. And of course, you get to spoil them a little bit because they know that, well, I'm going to call Grandy because, and Grandy might take care of something for them.
She
And
might. I think I'm gonna
well,
call
that's what
Grandy.
grandparents are for. So, you're happy for them. And I just look at my job is to boost their spirit
Yeah.
and make sure that they know they are perfect, and they know that they're adored, and they know that whoever they are, I'm happy.
It's a beautiful gift. Just a beautiful gift.
Well, I plan on living to 100. So I said to my children, brace yourselves and govern yourselves accordingly.
That's what I tell my
Um,
kids too. I'm like, "We're not even close to done here."
Not even close. And I literally, when I saw Betty White's birthday, I literally pinged my children and said, that's what I plan on doing. Oh, by the way, you, Matthew, you'll be 70. And little Maeve, who is 6 weeks old, will be 35. I can't wait.
Oh my god. Yeah, get your party clothes ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it's
Yeah. I adore
amazing.
them.
Deborah, I just want to say thank you so much. I just am grateful, well, for you just as a person, for your spirit, for everything that you're doing for women in technology, leadership, diversity, everything. And I know people are going to just want to check out your book and everything that you're doing. So we're going to include that in the show notes. But before we say goodbye, is there anything else that we missed, or any words of inspiration that you wanted to add?
Oh, wow. That's a good question. You know what? I think that what came to mind immediately, and, you and I haven't talked about any of these questions ahead of time. So that's how I know this is so right, is everybody needs to celebrate who they are, like embrace it and celebrate the life that you have. Because you're only coming through this life in this form, at least once, I think, in this form. And you just have to sort of take a breath and step back. It'll all be okay. Like it will work no matter whether there's triumph or tragedy and happiness and joy. That is literally the circle of life, and we all know it is. So enjoy it. One of my favorite books is The Road Less Traveled, and by Scott Peck. And I don't even know if it's the first line, but it's in the first page, I think, where it says, life is difficult, but it's so enjoyable. Like it's so worth making the journey. It can be difficult at times. It's not always difficult. There's lots of joy. I just look at it as just grab onto the things that make you happy and surround yourself with people that boost your spirit. Because if they don't, you're not wishing anybody ill will or anything like that. You wish them well and you send them on your way. But you need to surround yourself by people who boost your spirit.
It's so true. Deborah, thank you so much.
Thank you for asking me. This was so exciting. I was so thrilled to do it. Our paths were meant to cross. You know how much I love to give your book out and your cards, and I have too many. And this was just wonderful, Adrienne. Thank you so much for inviting me. I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. May some of the wisdom shared here inspire your most intentional living. For more information about this episode, this podcast, intentional living, and my work in the world, please visit mayyouknowjoy.com. You can also find my May You Know Joy and Seeds of Intention cards there, and my book, Intentional Days. You'll also find details for the Intentional Days membership, where you can gain access to a thriving community of intentional souls and lots of regular inspiration. I've got you covered. Until next time, I wish you great joy and many intentional days.